Let's talk about blame and acceptance. Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, where we talk about real life issues and tease apart what's true and what's not. And in this series of Torah for Today, we take a short idea from the Torah portion of the week to impact and upgrade our everyday lives. It's a horrific story on a day that should have been filled with joy, as finally all the work that the Jews put into building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, came to be. And Aaron and his two sons went in. But what happened next? Tragedy struck as Aaron's two sons were killed. Now, there are various explanations as to what happened that caused their death. But let's look at a fascinating outtake that comes from this story. So the Torah comments on Aaron's reaction to this tragedy of losing his two incredible sons. And what does it tell us about him? It tells us that he was silent. What gave him the strength? What gave him and his wife Elisheva the strength to accept this tragedy with silence? There's a lesson that we can learn from this, because not only was there silence, a silence to God, an acceptance of what God's decree was, but it was also a silence and an acceptance of themselves. There was no self-blame, there was no guilt, there was no questions of what have we done wrong for this to have happened. And that is true faith, to be able to accept something that happens without the need for the self-blame and the guilt. After the war, after the Holocaust, there was a conference in London where a group of rabbis got together to discuss how they could come to understand the terrible tragedy of the Holocaust. And different rabbis got up and suggested different ideas, until Dayan Abramsky stood up. He banged his fists on the table and he said, "We can't do this." When Aaron lost his two sons, his response was silence. That silence was an acceptance of God's will without guilt, blame. We have to accept that there are some things that are beyond our comprehension. And for us too, there are times in our lives where things happen and we can struggle, but we mustn't go down the route of blame and self-guilt. Yes, there is a time to, with compassion, see if there's something we can learn from it, but that is not through the route of blaming and self-guilt. Instead, we can learn from Aaron to accept. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. You can find me on Instagram. It's Gila Ross. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.